intolerance for same-sex parents in household. So finding attitudes in our broader culture that could bear on the child as far as you've observed. The Social Foundations of Education, otherwise known as EDFON 420, is a course that is concerned with making clear the relevance of social processes to the educational institution and its ideals and its practices. The goal is to help teacher candidates understand the relevance of social factors to their decision making with respect to how they conduct their classroom, but also to how education looks in the 21st century in terms of its delivery, its accountability, its policies, etc., etc. I believe that the 420 allows the teaching major to see his or her practice in a different way. So 420 is really concerned about making that theory to practice connection. So the theories that concern pedagogy, various kinds, content pedagogy, instructional design, instructional planning, all of those are grand theories, but we have to, of course, implement them in the classroom. And so in the process of implementation, there are multiple factors to consider. And so I think without the social foundations focus or lens, it's easy for the teacher candidate to fall into a technical approach. And this is a sort of formulation that's been talked about by Ziegner and Liston, who discussed the difference between the technical practitioner and the reflective practitioner. So social foundations, I think, is the bridge that makes it possible for the teacher candidate to understand what it means to reflect on his or her practice, and not just to see the classroom as a matter of implementing, standard practices. So we hope to give the teacher candidate the content, the background, the information, the perspective to reflect on their practices in a way that can benefit the student and can advance the K-12 students' learning.
The lessons are not as lecturing as I had first thought. Most classes are very lecture based. It's very, we're a very close-knit group, so we all can, have our opinions and feel comfortable enough to share them. We all kind of go back and forth with sharing our opinions. She'll basically ask us questions relating to our field, and as a teacher, things that we need to consider, challenges we'll face, like I had said, teaching in a democracy, and the politics that are all going around. So it's really comfortable setting. I know what we say in class is going to stay in class. So if we do say something that's a little uncomfortable, because politics and religion and all that can be uncomfortable, we don't normally talk about it. So it's just a very close-knit group. So it's not very lecture-based. We obviously learn a lot about philosophy and different philosophers, and we read articles, but it's comfortable enough to be ourselves and say what we are thinking. In the EDFO class, we all wrote papers about challenges that we would face in a democracy. So those are all on a website now, but we did have a contest within our class to see if you would go to New Orleans, and there was a conference there that we could go and read our papers. So that was really enjoyable. Me and two other girls from the class had got the chance to go, so it was a great opportunity to even see the culture there, because the whole point of the class is within your cultural context. So it was really interesting and just a really great experience, and an opportunity that I had been given because of the class, and they had gotten a grant for it, so it was no out-of-pocket money for me. So it was really great.
Educational Foundations 420 for me, it's all about the context of the school you're in, the community you're in. We're learning about philosophical context, historical context, all of that. It's been really interesting because we've taken bus tours around Muncie, so we've gotten to see where our students come from, and I really enjoy that because you go into a classroom and you make assumptions about like, this is where I think this kid comes from, this is what I think their background might be like, just based on maybe stereotypical stuff or whatever. But it's been really interesting that we actually delve into what their context is. So I think for me, it's just been mostly about learning about the students. Some of the things that I've learned within the class that I've been able to apply towards the classroom that I've been working in, I've learned mostly about like, how do you incorporate the context that you've learned about? Like when we took our bus tours, we learned like, this is where your students come from. This is a historical context of where your students come from. And how do you bring that into the classroom? And it's, we've worked on modifying our lesson plans to make it more contextual for the students. And that's something I feel like I've really enjoyed because it's good practice for, when I'm actually teaching or even when I'm student teaching. This course has really impacted how I think about my teaching in the future. I still feel passionate about being a teacher. I love little kids. That's why I'm early childhood. But we have talked a lot about, like I said, the context of where you are. And it's just really made me think about wherever I go, I need to know the history of the place, where my students come from, and so I can incorporate that into my classroom. And I just feel so much more prepared, like I said, for student teaching, because this experience, you're in the classroom all day, twice a week. In the other ones, you wouldn't be. So I know like what happens in the morning, what happens, after lunch, what happens during recess, what happens at the end of the day. I know more about like the procedures that you would have to learn when you're student teaching or teaching on your own than, I would have before. So I've really enjoyed that. I just feel much more prepared and much more passionate.